The credit crisis and this whole episode with the bailout bill in the US and our bailouts here goes to the heart of problems with the democratic capitalist system in our Anglophone societies. It is accepted that the bailout bill passed the Senate much more easily than the House of Reps because only 1/3 of the Senate's politicians are up for re-election in November. In other words, a majority of politicians in the Senate did not need the support of their constituents in a few weeks to get re-elected, so they were free to act according to party political and self-interested objectives. It is yet more proof of something we all know to be true, that we really only have genuine democracy for a few short weeks in each electoral cycle, just before the politicians need our votes. As Australians, let's think back to the decision to commit troops to the Iraq War. Opinion polls consistently showed that 70% of Australians disagreed with Australia's involvement. Did that count one iota? No, don't be silly. A federal election wasn't scheduled for another 2 years. Right now, the voters are saying that they are sick and tired of their taxpayer money being used by politicians to bail out their mates in business. Does that count one iota? Only to the politicians needing your vote in the next few weeks. This is an enormous conflict of interest. Just think how many politicians accept lucrative consultancies after they retire from politics. And ask yourself whether Mr. Howard would have been invited on a speaking tour of the US, earning $100,000 an appearance, if he had not put Australian lives in risk in Iraq. I haven't noticed Jacques Chirac on a US speaking tour, and if he did, he'd probably get pelted by freedom fries. In my view, this current crisis has moved on from the financial system. The events of the last few weeks have shown that it is now a crisis of confidence in the entire system. The seeping away of trust from elected officials was gradual, occurring over the last few decades, but it was also pervasive. Nowadays, politicians enjoy the same level of respect as second-hand car salesmen. It would be interesting to run a poll right now asking Australians whether they trust political and business elites to use our taxpayer funds wisely and place the interests of the average Aussie front and centre in any crisis response. I suspect that a very, very high proportion of respondents would answer with a resounding no. Now, I want to be clear that I am not saying that nothing should be done about the ongoing financial crisis. I am simply saying that so far the responses that have been proposed appear to me to be an attempt to wallpaper over the deficiencies in the hopes that things might just get back on the same track we were heading down before, which of course is the best outcome for the political and business elites because they know how to make that system work for them. One of the frequently quoted justifications for the US bailout said on CNBC is anecdotes of car sales dropping because clients are unable to secure credit. Seriously, is it really a crisis if somebody is unable to borrow even more to buy a discretionary item which will not produce anything for them or their country? Isn't that overconsumption paid by foreign investors how we got to be in this position in the first place? I would feel a whole lot more comfortable with any response by our government if they gave the academic economists, such as Steve Keen and many others, a far more central role in formulating any crisis management plan in Australia. Why academics? Well, because they are about the only ones with the necessary knowledge who do not have enormous conflicts of interest. And in saying that, I will add from my own experience that this has changed somewhat over the last few decades. The tight funding environment and policies to align national research objectives with business has resulted in growing conflicts. Still, academics have far fewer conflicts of interest than industry and political economists. Now, I want to conclude by saying that I'm not at all pessimistic because of what is happening. On the contrary, I am very optimistic. It is frequently said that if something seems to be too good to be true, then it probably is. I would suggest to you that the last 5 or 6 years were too good to be true. In central bankers speak, the punch bowl was left out and people were not only dancing on the table, they were swinging from the chandeliers. In my view, because this period of excess was very much in the personal sector, it will also be considered the era of personal greed. It is clear to me that the people who benefited, or even those that were leveraging up thinking that they were benefiting, were completely unapologetic and uncaring that others in society were doing it tough. I know enough about history to know that great things and great human spirit can come out of adversity. The Great Depression and the Second World War laid the framework for a system which only just now begun to break down, in part because political lawmakers have whittled away at it. When I lived in Munich, I visited Dachau several times. Each time was emotional. But the thing that has never left me is the profound sense of humanity of the prisoners. They were segregated and coded on the basis of colour, race, religion, politics, sexual orientation and more. And they had coloured symbols sewn on their uniforms. But that meant nothing to the prisoners. Even though they were weak, with malnutrition and ill, if the man next to them fell, they picked them up, no matter what symbol was sewn on them. When it all comes down to it, we are all just human beings trying to survive and make the best we can. I don't want this crisis to get really bad. I don't want for us to have another Great Depression. And I'm not suggesting that a Great Depression or anything economic could be as bad as World War II or what happened in some of those camps. But I do hope that our society will find humanity again out of this crisis. Thank you. www.geocities.com/homesforaussies. Standing up for affordable housing for all Australians. Written and spoken by Dr. Brett Edgerton, founder of Homes for Aussies.